Charlie, your season so far, talk to me.
Mixed bag, I'd probably say the least. It's never dull following Chelsea. Obviously, we had the sanctions last season. Didn't really thought, we'll settle down this season. We'll just try and have a normal season by our standards. But then from there, we have Thomas Tuchel sacked. Graham Potter comes in. We then go on a mass spending spree in January. Yeah, all sorts have been going on. But ultimately, exciting times ahead in terms of the investment in January, in terms of the caliber of players coming in terms of the owner's ambitions and the backing of the manager. The results on the pitch have not been good. I've been to a number of games this season up and down the country where we just haven't turned up week in, week out on the pitch. And I'm fully aware that it's going to take time for these new players to bed in. It's going to take time for Graham Potter to get used to managing at a top club. He's learning on the job as well. And I think with Chelsea, it's kind of the unique situation this season where we've kind of got everyone that's in senior positions, whether it be manager or whether it be at boardroom level. Everyone's new and everyone's learning on the job at the same time, which is, all right, it's not an excuse, but it certainly doesn't help the process and the speed that we're kind of moving at this season. But look, it's not good enough. Ultimately, is a situation. We're ninth in the league. We scored 3 goals in our last 7 games. We're miles off the top of the league. I think we're maybe 10 points or so off the top 4. If we get our act together, maybe we could make a push towards that top 4 near the end of the season. But yeah, ultimately, I think this season is kind of just about getting ourselves ready for next season to hit the ground running. We've kind of had a summer window in January. These players have got kind of the second half of the season to bed in, then a full preseason, and then next season, hopefully we can hit the ground running. And that's when I'll start to judge Graham Potter more. Obviously, I'm not saying he's got a free pass and it doesn't matter what results we get for the rest of the season, because he has to show, for me, that there's clear signs of progress, even if we're kind of losing matches, and we will lose more matches this season. But as long as we're moving in the right direction, as a sign of kind of the style of football we're looking to play, as a sign of progression, there's a sign of kind of chemistry forming between the team and the players, then I would take that. It's strange because, as I say, we're so used to winning. That's kind of what we've done. Like for myself and many Chelsea fans, we've just grown up following the club, and all it's been is winning. And when you don't win, it's a little bit odd, and you don't really know how to feel. But I mean, as I said, the January window's kind of given a lift around the place. Amazing what a few signings can do to lift the mood, and you kind of forget. Yeah, well, yeah. But to lift the mood around the place. I know the game against Fulham on Friday night, ultimately the result wasn't great, but before kickoff and stuff, there was a real buzz around the place. That hasn't really felt like that for a long time this season. So look, we just need to push on. But ultimately, as I say, realistically, not good enough is the bottom line.
What a wonderful summary, by the way. I quite enjoyed listening to that. Right, let me pick apart a couple of your thought processes, though. January transfer window, like you said, there is a buzz there. Was there any players in particular that you were happy to see come to Chelsea?
Enzo Fernandez, I think the big one on deadline day. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I watched loads of him before he came to Benfica. I watched a bit of him at Benfica in the Champions League. Obviously, seen him a lot more in the World Cup. I think he appeared on many people's radars during that tournament. Where look, he had a very good tournament, made things tick for Argentina in that midfield, and you can see that he's got immense ability. Is he worth that money? Is any footballer really worth more than £100 million? Probably not, but I think for Chelsea and for other teams as well that will find that are looking for midfield players, you're shopping from a very small list of guys that are actually going to go into your team and make them better and be a first choice midfield player for a top club. And you're shopping from a list of Enzo Fernandez, Jude Bellingham, Declan Rice, and maybe Moises Caicedo at Brighton. But other than that, you're struggling a little bit. You're then dropping down a caliber of player. So yeah, look, we had to pay the money for him. It's exciting. And look, his debut on Friday he had one training session. I'm not saying he was like spectacular, but he looked good. He's solid, and you can really tell that he's got a bit of class about him. We just need to put the pieces around him in the midfield. I'd like to see him play a bit further up the pitch. Obviously, Needs must have got no Jorginho. We had other injuries as well, so we had to play as more of a defensive midfield player. But hopefully, once everyone gets back thick again, we can see him playing kind of in that number 8 role further up the pitch, which I think probably suits him a little bit better. I think I was happy to see Malo Gusto sign. Obviously, I know we've loaned him back to Lyon, but to finally address that right back situation for next season is a massive plus. Again, an area that's not been dealt with by the club for a number of years now. So great to see that one done. And I think Mykhailo Mudryk as well is an exciting signing. I mean, that was a bit of a protracted transfer saga, kind of Arsenal in the driving seat. So there were kind of sniffs before the City game when we played them at Stamford Bridge that, Dario Serna and some Shakhtar representatives were at Stamford Bridge. Didn't really think too much of it. And then there was that Saturday afternoon where suddenly it's just like the cavalry just arrived at the Shakhtar hotel in Turkey. And we just didn't leave until Mudryk was back on the plane with us. So it's one of them. But yeah, Mudryk, I think I was at Anfield. I thought Mudryk was really exciting, obviously, against Fulham. He wasn't good at all. Didn't get into the game. Didn't get much of the ball. But subsequently transpired that he'd had a heavy cold all week, and they'd agreed to play 60 minutes, but he was heavy legged and not feeling it after 45. But yeah, I'd say Enzo and Mykhailo Mudryk, and obviously João Felix as well is an exciting proposition, even though we've only seen an hour of action from him.
For a bit of context, were you happy with this sacking of Tuchel earlier in the season?
No, personally, because I think all Chelsea fans would have loved him to stay. But I think, Tuchel wasn't sacked for results purposes, results reasons. Even look, the results were terrible, and some of the football we were playing was awful towards the end of his reign. But the reason for Tuchel's sacking was the fact that his vision didn't align with the vision that the owners had for the club. I think Tuchel's very much a win now manager rather than a manager that looks to build a project or build like a team over a number of years. You only have to look at his career where he's kind of been 2 to 3 years Dortmund, 2 to 3 years PSG. It's almost like in that Mourinho and that Conte mold where you come in, you instantly win in the first couple of years, and then when you stop winning, you move on. They don't tend to be project managers. So look, it wasn't a particularly popular decision amongst the Chelsea fan base at the time, but I think now that time's gone by, and you kind of had more time to reflect on it. Ultimately, when new owners come in, if the values don't align with manager and owner, then you've got to move on. And there's always a risk when you have a takeover that owners are going to want to bring their own man in. So yes, disappointing because he's done so much for the club in a short space of time. He had a real affinity with the fans and a real connection, and the way that he handled everything during the sanctions, being asked difficult questions when no one else in the club really stepped forward in a senior position when they should have done. Yeah, it's a shame. But ultimately, the visions didn't align, and he went.
Now, onto your current manager, Graham Potter. You've just spoken about how he needs time, about how he needs the second half of the season to essentially get moulding his team and getting the new signings bedded in. Are you confident he can do that, though?
Yes, I am. I mean, there's a large section of the fan base that believe that he's not the right man, or they just never liked the appointment in the first place. I think, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about sort of a large section of the fan base that have only grown up knowing what it's like to win. And the default reaction under Roman to not winning was to sack the manager. And so that's kind of the natural thing for people to go to. Oh, we're not doing well, we better get rid of the manager, without sort of looking at the bigger issues at the club in terms of, the fact that the squad's not been reinvested in properly for a number of years. We've spent a lot of money, but we've misspent that money massively. There's been no real clear recruitment plan, etc., and things like that. But ultimately, for Graham Potter, I think I back him, and I'll back him until he gives me reason not to back him. But there are certain things that he needs to improve upon, and he's still learning in the job. But I think there's a few instances where he's perhaps given too much credit to the opposition in terms of almost speaking as if he was at Brighton still, rather than, like, for example, we were up at Forest on New Year's Day. We were terrible, and we just hung on for a point in the second half, and he was speaking like sort of Forest were kind of like the next coming of prime Barcelona at the end of the game. Maybe a point for Brighton is good at Forest, but for Chelsea, that's not acceptable. So it's just little things like the way he speaks in the press, and that will obviously improve, and he'll mould himself more into a Chelsea manager and speak more like that. In terms of kind of in-game tactics, substitutions in certain instances, and team lineups haven't been great. I've not been particularly happy with the fact that he persists with picking individuals that are not in form and are turning up week in, week out and doing absolutely nothing. Mainly Mason Mount and Kai Havertz. I mean, Mount, I think, should stay, and I think the criticism he gets is ridiculous for what he's done. He's done a lot in his Chelsea career for the club, and you're entitled to a bad season. If you think Mount should leave, or you don't think he deserves a new contract, just leave it at that. that's okay. That's your opinion. But Mount needs to be taken out of the firing line. Kai Havertz needs to be taken out of the firing line as well. And now that we've got these new signings, and now that key players are coming back from injury, there's not really any excuse for Potter now to not make these big calls. And he's got to show that he's got that authority to make the big calls and drop those players for not performing well. Because I think a lot of guys have become complacent because there's not been the competition for places in the squad. But now we've got that. We should see that, and it can hopefully only improve those players' performances as well, because they know they don't play well, they'll be out of the team. Whereas at the moment, it kind of doesn't matter how you play because there was no one else really to come in.
Well, explain. Thank you. Right, from your team to my team, what's your thoughts on West Ham?
Should be doing a lot better than they are. I think it's probably a little bit the same as Chelsea. I mean, I look at West Ham. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched loads of them because I haven't, but I think particularly last season, fantastic season. Really exciting. Obviously, you had your Europa League run to the semis. I think Declan Rice is a fantastic footballer. The likes of, obviously, Jared Bowen having a very good season as well. Solid defensively. A decent team. And you've made some good signings as well in the summer. I really like Lucas Paquetá. I think he's a very good player. I think Skamaka can be good as well if he's kind of utilised properly. I mean, Ben Rama's got ability, but he almost reminds me a little bit of Hakim Ziyech, ability, but doesn't really turn up that often, and sometimes doesn't look like he's too bothered. But I think West Ham are a good team, but I don't really know where it's going wrong for David Moyes at the moment, because yes, there's a few injuries at the moment for you guys, but I mean, Declan Rice is still performing pretty well week in, week out. Standout performer, really. Paqueta's a good player, as I said, and the forward line when everyone's fit is not bad. So I don't really know where it's going wrong, but there's no way when you look at West Ham's squad that you should be 1 point above the drop zone.
I think it depends which West Ham fan you ask as to what answer you will get to. I know you didn't ask a question per se in there, but you were alluding to saying, well, I don't know what's going wrong, what is going wrong, but it depends who you ask as to what answer you're going to get back. There's been a bit of a spotlight on David Moyes from the outside looking in. What's your opinion on him as a manager and the job he's done at West Ham? And ultimately, do you feel he should be sacked by West Ham?
I think he's done a fantastic job. It probably, when I saw him return, I thought, that's West Ham. Maybe they could have done a bit better there, or they could have, tried to get someone else. Maybe they did, but they couldn't. I don't know. But fair play has kind of proven me wrong. Fantastic season, as I said, last season. And then you kind of, I don't know, you look at Moyes, you think he's a safe pair of hands. But I always feel that West Ham, you definitely punched above your weight last season. I don't think there's any denying that. And perhaps there was always going to be a slight drop-off this season because it's very hard to sort of follow that up, get the recruitment right in the summer, add what you need, add the quality you need in the positions. But there's having a drop-off and then it's having a drop-off. And for West Ham to be 1 point above the relegation zone with the squad that they've got, that shouldn't be happening. And the drop-off shouldn't be that bad. The fact that, over halfway through the season, and West Ham are banging a relegation battle when you were European semi-finalists last season, that's quite some drop-off. I mean, what do you put that down to? I mean, because it's largely the same group of players with some good additions in the summer, but shouldn't they stop listening to Moyes? They stop buying into the ideas, or?
No, I think if we look at our recent performance against Newcastle, he hasn't lost a dressing room, and I think if you want to go back a little bit further than that, we played Leeds, we drew 2-2 at Ellen Road, and the fight was there from the players. So he's definitely got the players on his side. I think if you go back to last year, as in the whole calendar year 2022, while we were doing that run in the European campaign, there was a bit of a drop off in the Premier League as well, and I think some like me was a little bit naive to think, well, maybe it's just because we're focusing on the European campaign, there's going to be a domino effect, which is we're going to lose points in the Premier League. And I think now, looking back in hindsight, it's possibly papered over the cracks a little bit because our form in 2022 as a calendar year has been terrible from Christmas right through till now, essentially. And I'm talking Christmas 2021. Yeah. It's not been good at all. The football hasn't been very good. It's not been a very enjoyable experience. Now, post-World Cup, we have had, in my opinion, I think we've had a decent improvement. It's hard to really measure it, though, because a win came against Brentford reserves in the FA Cup. We beat Derby County, a League One side, in the FA Cup. We drew with Leeds, went and beat Everton, who were horrendously bad under Frank Lampard. And then we've just gone to Newcastle and got a point, which I think is a really good point. But they were missing Bruno. So it's like, is it because they were missing Bruno and who makes them tick and kind of thing? So it's been hard to really measure how much we can read into this form, because this calendar year we played 6, won 3, drawn 2, and lost 1. So we're actually not looking too bad, all things considered. And I think the next 3 games, which is yourselves, then Tottenham, and then Nottingham Forest, I think that'll be a real measure of if we're turning the corner under David Moyes a little bit. But the one thing I will say is our centre-back, Nathan Gerrard, he was the first signing in the summer. So although we got Paquetá, we got Scamacca, we also got Emerson from yourself as well. Nathan Gerrard, we went and got just straight away, bang, 30 million or whatever we spent on him. And he was labelled as the marquee signing. Now, obviously,
really good.
But he was injured for the whole first half of the season. He picked up an injury pre-season. We didn't see him. The first time we saw him properly, it was in the World Cup for Morocco. He played a couple of European Conference League group stage games, but it's hard to measure them when they're playing up against easy opposition. He was untested for 90 minutes, but he looked good. But since the World Cup, he's gone into that back 3. He's looked fantastic. He was unbelievable against Newcastle. He was really good against Everton. And I do think he will make a huge difference between now and the end of the season. I mean, we've got a really good defence. I think we've got the 5th best defensive record in the Premier League, yet we're down the bottom table. It's scoring goals that's our problem. Bowen's not providing like he was. Like you said, Ben Rama's inconsistent. Scamacca hasn't really been doing it. Antonio's probably just age has caught up with him. He's 32 years old. He's been playing non-stop for 2 years under David Moyes. So I think that's just caught up. So I think it's a lot of different things coming together at one point, and it hits you hard when that happens. And so we'll see if we've turned the corner. Do you think West Ham will get relegated? I think I know your answer for this, but
no, I don't think so. I mean, look, you can like the whole thing. You're too good to go down. It's never true, because people go down because they're ultimately not good enough. But I look at West Ham and I look at the teams in and around at the bottom of the table. And I think they've got, in David Moyes, they've got a manager that is more than good enough to get them out of it. And they've got a squad that is better than the likes of Southampton. It's better than Bournemouth's squad. It's better than Everton's squad. I'm not saying that West Ham have been amazing this season, but I think what's going in the favour for them is the fact that there's definitely 3 teams worse than them for me. I mean, just quickly, on that Everton game, do you think Moyes would have been sacked if you'd lost?
That's the only game I've thought he was maybe on the brink. All the games previous, I've thought he'll be fine. Even if in this game as well, by the way, if we lose on Saturday, he'll still be here. I think he'll be here for the Nottingham Forest one, which is 3 games away, regardless of yourselves and Spurs. I think we could lose those 2 and he'll still be here for the Forest one. If he lost that one, then I think the pressure gets cranked up again. That Everton one, I think, was the only time I felt that he might get sacked if he lost. But we won comfortably in the end. And, the draw against Newcastle as well, I think it's bought him quite a lot of time. But that Nottingham Forest game is the last game in February. So after that one, we're into March, and it's almost like, well, you might as well just keep him to some extent. So I've sort of come around to the idea Moyes is here for the rest of the season, regardless of results, really. And in fairness to the board, they back him, they support him. They think he's going to get us out of this. They've got faith in him. So far in 2023, they've been proven correct to stick by their man. Whether they are correct coming in the season, we'll have to wait and see. But at the moment, they're looking like they've made the right decision potentially. So, anyway, let's turn our eyes to Saturday. How do you see this one going then? I mean, you're a little bit goal shy, but you're not. Your defense is looking quite good. It's a bit like West Ham, really. Can't score, but you can keep clean sheets.
I mean, we got 3 goals in our last 7 games. It's the same old with us. We can't put the ball in the back of the net. We really struggle to create, and we really struggle to score goals. Plus, we haven't got a good record at the London Stadium either. For whatever reason, we find it difficult to go there. I remember last season we went there and we lost. I think we ended up losing 3-2 in the end. 2 howlers from Mendy. Obviously, he won't be in goal this time, not only because he's not number 1 anymore, but he's also injured. I think João Felix return from suspension is going to be a big plus. I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but I was at Craven Cottage when he made his debut, all 60 minutes of it, and he looked a touch above what we've got. And now I don't know if that's because he's so good or because what we've got is so bad. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I think he's going to be a big plus. As I said, defensively, we've looked really good recently. We've seemed to be a lot more solid, and actually we've got the 3rd best defensive record in the league. We've only got 1 less clean sheet than Arsenal, but we're ninth, miles off the top of the league. So it's just at the other end where we're struggling. I think. I mean, if Kovacic, who's back in training, was back in training this week, if he's fit enough to start, and I think a pivot of him and Enzo Fernandez is exciting. Definitely our two best midfield players that are available right now. But ultimately, it's going to be tough because London Derby form goes out the window. It's basically who's more up for it on the day. But we're unbeaten in our last three, but it's also only one win in the last three with one goal. So. I'm not that confident, and it's kind of just where we are at the moment as Chelsea and as a Chelsea fan, where I don't go into any games thinking, yeah, we're going to win this game, because I don't have the confidence in the side, and I've not seen anything from the side to suggest that we can go to places like West Ham and actually get a result. So we do need to win. We do need to start putting more points on the board and climbing the table, but I think this is going to be really tricky.
Can I get your score prediction then?
I'm going to go, I think a 1-1 draw.
Would you take that, by the way? Would you be okay with a draw? Or does it depend on the team selection and the performance, whether you're happy or not?
I think it definitely depends on those two things. I mean, a draw, would I take a draw right now? I probably would, considering how things have been going. But again, if it were to be a draw on Saturday, then I think it's important to contextualise it with what was the performance like, and did he make the right calls with the team selection? And that will kind of shape the reaction to that result if it obviously were to happen.
Well, the one thing I'll give you a little bit of hope with, I didn't want to give you this before your score prediction, didn't want to sway you. Graham Potter has got David Moyes' number. He's always beating him. Moyes, we just lose. Whenever West Ham played Brighton, we just lost. And to be fair, that was pre-Potter and pre-Moyes as well. But in the last couple of games where we've gone up against Brighton, Potter has completely outdone Moyes tactically, very noticeably as well tactically, where he just does little things with his midfield and that, and Moyes just doesn't react to it. And I'm not even sure he notices it sometimes, but Potter's got a really good record against David Moyes. So that'll give you some hope going into Saturday. But interesting conversation. I appreciate that, Charlie. Well, if you want to hear more from Charlie, he's from Chelsea Fan TV, but he's also got his own Chelsea Fan channel. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below this, and his latest video will be on your end slate in about a minute's time. But if you've enjoyed this video, please do drop a like on it, subscribe if you're new to Hammers Chat. And Charlie, thank you very much. Pleasure speaking to you.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it a lot. Cheers.